discussion. They've heard our concerns and so forth. Whatever economic philosophy you follow as to whether or not there should be changes or we should be looking at the revenue side in this particular economic climate, it could take us months, if not years, to resolve. I think taking anything off the table as a possibility to deal with this is irresponsible. And the reality here is that there will be a few of us up here who will be responsible for making the decisions here. I appreciate your expanding it, but I think here that, in fact, a motion on what we should or should not direct the staff to do, or the CEO's office to do, is unnecessary. I think they have ears. I think the purpose of this discussion is to put this in place, and I would hate to have to look at in January or next February saying, oh, no, we didn't vote on that to go forward, and that's why it wasn't paid attention to. Or I said that, and they didn't notice it. Well, it wasn't in the motion. I don't know what's in the motion, what's not in the motion, explicitly or implicitly. And so I will vote against this because it does exclude an option, which is to pay attention to revenue. Mendocino County is famously ignorant of its opportunities in the area of revenue generation. Famous in California, not in the nation, for its failure to pay serious attention to revenue sources that would allow us to do business in a responsible and an effective manner. That's a larger debate. But I think that when we talk about these other very dire and very difficult options, we should also take up that taboo topic here in the next few months. And I would not want that taken off the table. I will reassert it whether the motion passes or fails. I will say, yeah, but that was back in December. Now it's January, it's February. Let's pay attention to revenue sources and be a little more explicit in finding what we can get and what we have to get, because it's the better choice over and against some of these other choices that will be thrust at us. And economic theories be damned. We have a job to do up here, and I think it's responsible to make these kind of statements at this time, given the fact is we are in a state of transition in a time of crisis, and that's a heck of a place to be.
To the CEO's office, we do have a motion before us, but we hired all you folks to be intelligent people. If opportunities for increased fees or penalties or whatever are appropriate, you're not going to dissuade or not allow those to take place just because they specifically weren't listed in the motion. Is that a fair statement?
That we will pursue all avenues for the budget. I think the concern I hear from Supervisor Colfax and from someone who's been here a year, I would say there is a reluctance to increase fees in some areas, and I think we do have to be open and honest about that dialogue, and we have to say everybody needs to pay their fair share of the cost of those services. Again, we've heard comments from the board members. This was very helpful today. This was a good dialogue between everyone. We will be pursuing, regardless of board direction, we will pursue all items that we gave you on the list because we think we have to. So we did not come prepared today to ask you for a particular motion. We came prepared to tell you that everything that's on the list we're going to talk about, because at this point it is about survival of the organization that we run.
Thank you. Before I go to the board members, Ms. Glassy?
If I could just say there is one area where the board may want to do something, and the other piece of this was just kind of affirming or changing what was on the summary here so that we know what our bottom shortfall is that we're looking at. But the one item is the issue that's in number 1 regarding the disposition of the insurance payment, because right now the previous board direction is in the consent item that was pulled off. And what that does is it puts $200 towards the general reserve and the remainder into contingency. what option one on this says is to take 335,000 of it and put it towards the general fund. So that is one area, and that fits with your consent item, where if you pass the consent item as is, that will add $335,000 to our shortfall that we would then be trying to address through all of these means. So you can either take the consent item as is, or you can modify it to say that 335,000 or whatever amount you want would go towards general fund in addition to the 200,000 that's going back to the general reserve. So that is the one area where we need.
Well, Mr. Chair, that was deferred. That discussion was deferred till later today. While I understand Allison's concerns, we do have a large number of employees here to recognize and several other critical things. I think we can make that part of this afternoon's discussion when we review that consent item.
You're remarkably well reading my mind today, so.
Exactly, I pulled that for that reason.
You're next.
Just a comment. I concur with Supervisor Colfax when he says we need to look at all options. I'm not a fan of higher fees. I think that's regressive. So to me, looking for revenue enhancements is totally different than just talking about increasing fees. For instance, I'd like to ask a question. There was a lot of you folks who went to CSAC. Was there any discussion at CSAC about how much sales tax leakage counties are losing because of no sales tax on internet sales? That should be a huge issue with CSAC. I hope it was.
That was not in any policy committee discussion at CSAC. They were focused on climate change, on budget shortfalls with the state, and with how it is that we're going to get through both the current year and next year with the current shortfall in revenues and economic stimulus regarding what we need to be in proper position to get our fair share of the federal economic stimulus reimbursement.
I just feel internet sales, we have a huge leakage in internet sales, and not only Mendocino County and most of your rural counties. And it's probably doubling every year, and we're not even talking about it.
That's
not an increase in fee or tax. That's getting a fair tax. You know, if a person has to pay business license and everything to have a shoe store down on Main Street and have to pay sales tax, it's not fair for a guy up in the hills that's selling 10,000 pairs of shoes through the internet and not paying no sales tax. And that's what's going on.
And certainly we can put that on our
Well, it should have been on CSAC's agenda. You know, I would think, you know, we talked about it in our legislative agenda, and now it's not even brought up at CSAC.
we can put it in our legislative agenda for this year, both in state and federal.
Okay. Supervisor Delmer.
Well, thank you. Supervisor Pinches, it's a national issue. It's not a state-only issue, and the National Association has on their deal, and they've been